Sweet. So do you like this list? Is there anything else you wanna touch on, talk about before we?
No, I think that list is good. Um,
Okay.
happy to run through those
Excellent.
topics.
Welcome back, everybody, to another slashMLS. It's our second of the week. Our first one of the week did kind of crazy good. I don't know why you guys liked it so much, but anyway. But we're here with Dan Dickinson. Also, as most of you guys know, Remy DWD. He won't admit to this, but he's the most recognizable mod probably of our MLS. Hey Dan, how are you doing?
I'll certainly admit to that. Just don't call me head mod.
Okay,
We don't have a hierarchy.
right. Uh-huh. That's what they all say. So anyways, this is going to be part one. We're going to do two parts today with both mods, or with a couple of mods, both Dan and Zach, some cruise dude on later to talk about San Jose. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Armless has been kind of crazy growing these last couple of months, last couple of weeks, honestly. There's been, within the last month, it's been the subreddit of the day. It's been trending. You guys had the CBA threads that had thousands of comments. The Orlando City game had thousands of comments. What's it been like to mod such craziness?
It's been pretty miserable, if I'm being completely honest here. With the rapid growth, which has been fantastic, we are getting a tremendous amount of duplicative content, of shit posting, of people asking things that are very clearly defined in the sidebar and the Free Kick Friday thing. So, it's the day-to-day pruning has certainly increased over the last few weeks. I am going to have to blow everyone's minds. The subreddit of the day thing, when that happened, I was actually surprised and had to look back in my notes when I had sent in those comments, because we actually got contacted about that 9 months ago. It was not like they decided earlier in the week, oh, you're going to be subreddit of the day. We that stuff went in ages ago, and I didn't even remember writing it when I saw the post saying that we were subreddit of the day. But it was a nice surprise, and
Wait, so that's a thing. That's a thing that you apply for?
no, we didn't apply for it. We had they have a staff. I don't quite understand how most of the rest of Reddit runs sometimes, but they apparently have people who go out and send mod mail to subs they want to feature, and they say, hey, we're going to feature you at some point. Can you answer these questions? Because we think this will be an okay interview. And a couple of us responded, and that's how the post ended up being written. But I don't know how they schedule it or anything like that. We certainly didn't apply for it. I don't know if they have a suggestion process that somebody else might have suggested us, but no, it sort of came out of the blue for us, and we answered it, and then 9 months later, you have a subreddit of the day, baby. And the trending stuff, we had been going kind of crazy with traffic most of the week anyhow. The CBA stuff obviously was a big deal Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday that week. And then Friday was First Kick, and Saturday was more games, and it's a big year for the league, just with two new teams. With consistent TV times on Friday and Sunday, and with Sky Sports actually airing games and advertising for them. So we did have a lot of newcomers, especially a lot of Europeans coming in saying, this is the year I decided to follow it. Can somebody help me pick a team? And so it's certainly the biggest Free Kick Friday thread I think I've posted since we started doing them in the middle of last year. So it's certainly been busy, and it's keeping us busy on the mod team.
Yeah, that European thing was a bit surprising to me. Like that news came in sometime last week or the week before.
It was in the middle of the CBA negotiations, as I recall, or it was right before.
Right.
That final week, and yeah, I mean, it was surprising that. I mean, I think I finally saw a number attached to the deal, and it was not a lot of money, but the visibility just from doing that is pretty intense, and I think if anything's going to change perceptions of MLS in Europe, and there was a fantastic piece that I submitted yesterday, and I'm blanking on who it was by, but I'm going to check my post history while I'm answering this question, and I'm going to say it was Rory Smith on ESPN FC, talking about the sort of mixed perceptions of the league internationally, because Europe has lamented for so many years, oh, Americans will never get soccer, Americans will never get soccer. Well, it's starting to be gotten as a sport over here, and now they're like, oh, it's a retirement league and it's terrible, and it's like they want to begrudge the country for not understanding the sport, and then they want to begrudge the country for understanding the sport. So, um, but I think that visibility is going to be the thing more than anything else that gets Europe, especially Europeans who have been, skeptical of MLS, over the hump of, it's not really that bad of a league quality of play wise. Um, and judging quality of play is a very subjective thing anyhow. Every league has terrible defenders giving up stupid goals. So in
Awful
any
refs.
case, but yeah, I agree. It sort of came out of left field, but MLS did announce very quietly last year that IMG was going to start negotiating the global TV rights,
Mhm.
and this was part of that. So um, it's good news for the league.
Yeah, it almost felt like for a couple of days there, the Europeans were less cynical about MLS than people over here, so that was kind of nice to see.
Yeah.
Um, so as so we talked a little bit about the CBA thing, and so I've got to ask you. I know you're one of the fair or not fair, one of the most cynical people that I follow on Twitter about MLS, and
Wow. The other day I was in a Twitter argument with some fans of a team that I'm not going to mention right now, and there were accusations being thrown my way, and Ted Westerveld, of all people,
oh dear.
um, randomly butted in and said, "Dan's not a bot, he's just sassy," and that is the nicest thing that Ted has ever said about me. So much so that it's actually in my Twitter bio right now. And it will stay there until I find a better joke to replace it with. But um, yeah, I'm glad I'm that cynical. Jesus.
Well, so how did you feel about the CBA from that
Um,
perspective?
well, so let me just touch briefly on the Reddit side of it because we had been looking and contemplating for a while something to do a live thread for.
Hmm.
And that was finally the thing that made sense because it doesn't really work for match threads. They're sequential updates. You can't go back and edit them after you've posted them.
Hmm.
And match threads sort of have their own thing anyhow.
And they're
But
kind of short. They're kind of too short to.
yeah, and,
Yeah.
and the live thread tool is really good about embedding tweets and rich media and articles and giving you cards like you get on Twitter.
Hmm.
So it ended up being the perfect format. My tragic flaw of doing it is that I decided to do it on my own, and I did it the day that I started it happened to be a day I was off from work, and we had the Red Bulls Media Day that afternoon. So it was
Hmm.
easy enough for me to keep up. But the next day I was back in the office, and Zach, who I know you guys are having on later, volunteered to jump in with me. But there were some stretches where we weren't able to update anything, and I know people were just sort of going frantic in the comments. So, but I think it was a good thing overall. I'm going to agree with Alexi and Taylor, and by extension Matt Doyle. I think it was a tie. I think the fact that so many players came out and saying, we gave up, we could have gotten more, shows that the players aren't happy necessarily with what they got. And I think the league certainly didn't want to budge on free agency. I mean, everybody heard the comments from Delroy Hansen, or whatever his name is, in Salt Lake. So,
I think
you
that's
know,
about right.
I think I'm gonna put an asterisk on this. I think the deal sounds like it's fair on both sides. The asterisk is we don't actually know what the deal is still.
Yeah.
We're a week later. We haven't gotten any real specifics in the form of a press release from either the league or the union, and the union's not so great at press relations, so that doesn't hugely surprise me. But the other thing, this isn't done because the general membership of the union still have to vote and approve it.
Hmm.
And if you dig into some of the threads about this, I've already brought this out, so apologize to anybody who's hearing this again. But um, when the 2010 CBA allegedly got done, because we found out yesterday that it never actually turned into a document, um, when the 2010 CBA got done, a month later the union voted on it, and you can dig on the union site, and there's a press release talking about the union approving it, or the general membership of the union approving it. But the thing that sticks out at me in that note is that the negotiating committee, which is players only, it's not Bob Foss or Foose or whatever his name is, um, they unanimously recommended the membership approve it. So,
Hmm.
if there's 30, 40 guys at the table, they said we think this is a good deal, vote for it. The final vote was only 84% in favor, which tells me that even with, a unanimous approval from the board doesn't necessarily mean that the membership's going to vote for it. Now, you take a negotiating committee that didn't agree on it, that you had a 12-7 vote or whatever it was in favor of accepting the deal. What's going to happen when it gets back to the rank and file? This is definitely not a done deal, and I think there's a possible. I'm not going to say it's a big chance. I haven't spoken to a lot of players after the CBA got done to get a temperature read. I know a lot of guys said they still needed to actually go and talk to their union reps and understand what had happened. But there's a reasonable chance this could blow up again in a month if the union membership just decides that it wasn't a good deal.
Does anyone know what would happen if that happens?
I would assume they'll continue working under the memo of understanding that probably got issued as part of the agreement to start the season on time. But it's very possible that this turns back into a work stoppage. I don't know how they would renegotiate the CBA mid-season. Those union reps obviously would like to keep playing. Mm-hmm. It's a big unknown, and that will be an interesting thing to watch for probably in April.
Well, that sounds kind of sucky. Let's talk about something a little bit more optimistic. Those live threads, the comment sections, that was like the happiest and nicest everybody in RMLS has been to each other since like those CONCACAF games where it's RMLS against everybody else.
Yeah.
I thought that was really neat, and it led to that really cool flowers thing, and a bunch of us, I think it was on Wednesday or Tuesday night, just stayed up until 2 a.m. following Zach's updates and finding each other on Twitter, and it was kind of fun.
I tend to stay out of threads that are sort of living, breathing things on their own, particularly match threads. And when I went to bed, I butted out of what was going on with the CBA thread. But when I woke up the next, I was wondering, can we keep this going overnight? Do I have to post a new thread in the morning? Sure enough, there was another 500 posts about things people were making for dinner and movies they were watching. So it was a little fascinating, and of course we created a new thread just to get by. I will say a couple of people came out of that calling for the free talk threads to come back, and I'll just generally say, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I get that people love to shoot the shit. I love the community. I love seeing people make friends outside on the subreddit who start talking to each other on Twitter. Those sorts of things always warm my heart. But we're really focusing on trying to get the post quality high. And the last time we did free talk threads, they turned to garbage pretty quickly.
So speaking of keeping the post quality high.
Yeah.
Matt
Do you like that segue that didn't seem like a segue?
Yeah. Matt Doyle, he did his AMA recently, and he kind of caused a little bit of a storm by saying that the RMLS, at least the comment quality, has gone down. Or specifically what's gone down is sometimes there will be a popular post, and it'll be predictable what the top post is, or the top comment is when you go in there, and it's like some sort of joke that is going to happen. I don't really know what question to ask other than what do you want to talk about that? What do you want to have to say about that?
I want to choose my words carefully because I can't do anything but agree with Matt. I came to the sub, I think, right around the time we hit 1,000 users. I don't recall if it was pre or post. I joined the mod team maybe 6 months after that, before we hit 2,000. The sub was very, very small back in the day. The sub's actually the reason I joined Reddit, believe it or not. Just because I knew I needed a place to talk about soccer as I got back into it, and it seemed like a good community at the time, which I still believe it is a good community. Yeah. But the growth and it's been unreal. I used to track the 1,000 subscriber milestones, and I've had to stop just because they come too quick. I don't necessarily watch the meter roll over on a given day anymore. I'm too busy doing other stuff. But there's definitely been a drop, not just in comment quality, but in post quality too. We get people posting, 10 different versions of predict who's going to win X, Y, or Z award at the end of the year. A good example from earlier in the week is, the TV ratings information came out the day after the games aired.
Yeah.
On Monday, we had like 4 posts. Here's Univision, here's ESPN, here's Fox, here's the local markets from Jonathan Tannenwald, here's something about Colorado. Like we ran through the ratings discussion on Monday, and it was done. And then Tuesday there were a couple of posts about ratings, and Wednesday there were a couple of posts about ratings, and today the league ran an article about the rate. And it's like we've talked about it, and I've removed it, and I point out that we had 6 open threads about it, and people get upset that we're removing the comments. It's like, but this has actual numbers. No, we had actual numbers before and I agree that the comments have gotten a little bit more miserable. I, as somebody who has to live and breathe New York soccer, I want to see NYCFC fans welcomed the same way as you do any other fan. And while there are some members that have that flair that are obnoxious as hell, as there are for every team, I think a certain number of them take an excess amount of shit just because, oh, you're owned by City Football Group, oh, you're Manchester City USA, and it's hard to deal with because it's not a deep offense for somebody to say your team is a sham, but if that's the tone, then people are going to keep saying that. Go ahead.
I feel like it's one thing for them to say something to that effect. I feel like it's another entirely to downvote for that reason.
Yeah, well, and I'll point out, we get mod mail maybe 3 times a year from somebody complaining bitterly that we have to do something about flare downvoting. I will point out that people have been complaining about this since I came onto the sub. It's always been a thing that people perceive. We've done everything we can about it, which is show a thing when you hover over the downvote button that says don't do this unless it's not contributing to the discussion. And Reddit gives us very few controls to do anything about it. We don't get an audit log of who downvoted who. We can't flag any users who we think are brigading or anything. Like, there is nothing we can do about it at this point. And I'm not going to post a reminder every month saying, hey guys, remember, don't downvote based on, because nobody's going to read it. It's Reddit. People have asked us, can we disable the downvotes? No. You turn off the style sheet, there's the downvotes. Can you turn off voting entirely? No. It's part of Reddit. There's no control for that. And it's just the one thing we did do that actually managed to stop some of that auto downvoting and the dogpiling was when we turned on auto hide the score for the first couple of hours, which we did as an experiment, and everybody screamed.
Everyone hated it.
Yeah, everybody screamed, "Oh, you've ruined Reddit! Turn it off!" Yeah. And we did. I would love to turn it back on because I think it would help a lot of this, but I don't want people screaming. And we can't do it selectively for some threads and not other. I realize people feel that in match threads it's counterproductive, and I get that. But I'll close generally and just say, I'm a close friend of Matt. Well, I'm not going to say he's a close friend of mine, but I've hung out with Matt outside of Reddit. I talk to him when I can, and the mod team certainly noticed a bunch of the mods were in that thread talking about it, but we are having a conversation in mod mail about what we can do, because we all love the place, we all want it to thrive, and there's not much more to say other than that.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm interested in something you said. If Reddit had the option to where you could audit downvotes, would you be interested in that?
Yes and no. I think it would be a tremendous pain in the ass to do.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know what it's like to subreddit a sub, the tools are very rudimentary, and you work around them. There's a reason so many subs use auto moderator, because that's like a stopgap to do a lot of stuff that we do by hand. So I can't imagine any way that they could implement vote auditing in a way that would not be obnoxious as shit. I'll tell you, when we have a serious spam problem too, and most people don't see it because we mark stuff as spam so quickly if we see it and as a mod you develop this sort of sixth sense of looking at somebody's post history and trying to figure out very quickly if they're a spammer. And unfortunately now I do it when I find friends of mine on Reddit because I immediately hit their post history and start auditing it in the same way. It's a terrible, terrible habit. But it's a hand process to figure out if somebody is spamming, and that kind of sucks. We
Yeah.
can flag stuff as spam, but it doesn't actually train the spam filter to catch it any better. So Reddit needs to work on some of those tools. Luckily, they do know that there's a sub that's just for moderators to talk about feature requests and things like that, and it has gotten a lot better. We didn't have a wiki when we started. We had to jam everything into the sidebar.
Hmm.
Um, there wasn't a flare system when slashMLS started. Believe it or not, it certainly improved, but something like downvoting, I don't think we'll ever be able to fix, sadly.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that's all I want to talk about meta subreddit stuff because we do have listeners outside of the subreddit. Crazy enough, and you're a big New York guy. You're a Red Bulls fan. NYCFC started last week. They're playing their first home game this weekend. Cosmos fans are, they're talking about things, and their team's
Hmm.
actually legitimately doing something. They're going to Cuba, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What to you is the most fascinating New York story right now?
I think the fascinating story is just New York. I wrote a piece on Gothamist. The people who want to read it can dig into my account and find it. Um, but what fascinated me coming into this season is all three of these teams are facing very different struggles right now. Um, the Red Bulls are trying needlessly in their 20th season to redefine themselves again. Oh, high tempo, blah blah blah. Ali Curtis, 300 pages. Jesse Marsh, such a question. No big stars by tier. It's the wrong time to do the rebuild because you have these other teams in the market who are fighting you for hearts and minds, as I unfortunately have to put it. So it's the wrong time to do that, and I'm glad they finally sort of realize they have history and maybe they want to do something about it. I should note I'm not officially a Red Bulls fan because I am credentialed media, but my wife does remain a season ticket holder, and she got her package this week, and the scarf in there has a MetroStars logo on it, which
Hmm.
if you told anybody that 5 years ago, you would not believe. But what I came to the realization of as I was writing my pieces, does grabbing onto your history, even if it's late, matter when that history never mattered in the market before? The club's been around for 20 years, but acknowledging you've been around for 20 years when nobody cared about those 20 years doesn't suddenly make people care. Maybe it will. I don't know.
Well, I think the people who buy season tickets and the people who are in the supporters groups, I think they would care, and maybe that's
They
why they're.
absolutely care, and it will help keep them. I
Uh-huh.
don't think there was ever going to be a giant exodus, though. That everybody talked, oh, NYCFC is going to pick off all these fans. NYCFC has done a tremendous job of selling season tickets. The last press blast, which was on Monday, was 15,000.
Yeah.
I don't hear any other clubs in the league trumpeting 15,000, except maybe Portland, maybe SKC, and they've done a fantastic job of that, but they said that 60% of their season ticket holders were first-time season ticket holders for any sport. So
Interesting.
that's not poaching away, and whether that means Yankees or Red Bulls or Mets or Knicks or Nets or any of the other 5 other teams I failed to mention in that conversation, we don't know, but
Mhm.
that's growing the soccer market in New York City. That's not killing the Red Bulls. Now, we'll see what Red Bull Arena looks like this year. I know a lot of people who are very down on what attendance will probably look like, but there is room in this market for more than one team. There always has
For
been.
sure. For
Um,
sure.
and I think NYCFC, to pivot to them, everybody is deeply aware of every time they've taken a reasonable step forward. You sign David Villa, you sort of nail the crest. What was the other thing they got? You sign Mix, those sorts of things. There's always a step back that's been associated with them. You've signed David Villa, but then the Frank Lampard thing happens.
Yeah.
You got the crest right, but you screwed up the jerseys because they look like Man City. And so, but they have this momentum with the ticket sales. They're doing really well for sales for the home opener. Um, Field thing notwithstanding. And the question is, can they keep it going? Because I've been to games at Yankee Stadium. They're not the best sightlines in the world. It's a pretty poor experience for soccer. We have no idea what the supporter section is going to sound like.
Mhm.
The third rail has done a great job bolstering their numbers, but what that turns into on game day, especially as a group that is, I've seen them bicker about, do we want to have capos? Do we want to, have a song book? No, let's just have it be organic. Like you have to figure that stuff out beforehand because that defines a lot of the atmosphere on the first day.
Yeah.
And if the team, as most expansion teams do, doesn't do much this year, fails to make the playoffs, falls out of the playoffs early, whatever else, how many of those fans who bought in for year one will be back for year two? That's the big question for me with NYCFC. And I'll touch very briefly on the Cosmos. The Cosmos are fighting to actually turn the corner and turn what's been a year and a half on the field into a breakthrough. They are so badly hamstrung by their stadium situation. They've been waiting on Albany for 2 years. Albany is showing no signs of actually resolving it, and they desperately need a home that they have some more control over.
Wait, Albany?
So their stadium plan, which you may remember from 2.5 years ago now almost,
Yeah.
was in response to a state RFP for what to do with a particular parcel of land that's technically in Long Island, but is just on the border with Queens. So they submitted a bid to the state. There's a state agency called Empire State Development, along with a bunch of other private industry folks who had plans for the thing. There have been no updates about what's going on with it. The state just has to pick a bid, and it's taken over 2 years. So that's why they're waiting on Albany. And for those of you who don't live in New York or have never lived in New York, Albany is terrible. They almost never get the budgets done on time. It's a known political gridlock area. So they desperately need that breakthrough. And I think, for me, the news that they signed Raul is the second biggest news of the offseason for the Cosmos. The bigger news is that they're going to play a game on Coney Island, because that will get them playing in Brooklyn, and people will come out to see them as a spectacle. I'm more likely to go to the game at Coney Island than I am to go to games at Hofstra, I'm not near either of them, but it's easier for me to get to Coney. So
I've been to I went to a Cosmos Railhawks game at Hofstra, and it was not the best.
No.
I don't like driving on Long Island.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I
it's
think
a little bit better than driving in the city, but
yeah, I think the Cosmos are starting to get to the point where they're considering other options because they can't wait for Albany forever. But we'll see.
So is there real danger with the Yankee Stadium threat that the Yankees are going to get mad and kick them out?
It's hard to say. I mean, I know Dave very well, who's the one who tweeted out that MLB is taking the wait-and-see approach tweet that blew up yesterday. I think that keep in mind, baseball players get injured all the time. The Yankees have been terrible for the last couple of years. Not terrible, but not what you'd expect out of the Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
And blaming anything, whether it's a bad hop on a ball or somebody twisting their ankle or whatever else, on a potential divot that was left by a soccer player seems a little spurious to me. Like, it's a field. Things happen on fields. Plenty of soccer players get injured on fields all the time anyhow, for random crap. That said, if it is noticeably contributing, if the outfield is torn up before the Yankees take the field for any game, it's going to start turning into a black eye. And while the Yankees are only 20% ownership, they are certainly the most important sports franchise in the New York market. So you will see Yankees hardcores turn against soccer very quickly. Whether or not the Yankees would eject their own club from the stadium, I can't speak to. I don't even want to speak to. But I do think it's incredibly important that NYCFC get a stadium deal going and get shovels in the ground and make it clear that Yankee Stadium is not their plan for the foreseeable future, because it's going to take years for the stadium to get built.
As a DC fan, I know what that's like. And,
exactly. And you look at the Red Bulls. The Red Bulls wanted to build at the Aqueduct. There are articles in the New York Times from 2002 with Nick Sakiewicz, who's now at Philly, talking about that they're looking at the Aqueduct. but they had to settle for Harrison because the land was available and the town was willing to work with them. They got it built pretty much entirely with private funding, and that's why they're there. And if you're trying in the 5 boroughs, it is exponentially harder.
Yeah. So one more question before I let you go. We did our season preview last week. I had Red Bulls in the second to last tier, just ahead of Colorado, Chicago,
Oh,
and
Ian.
who was it? Houston. So how wrong am I?
Uh, I think you're wrong only because the core of this team has not really changed. You've still got Bradley Wright Phillips. You've still got Dax. You've still got Lloyd Sam out on the right. You've still got Roy Miller, who I realize doesn't sound like a positive, but generally plays pretty well until he has his mental fart a couple times a year. You've got Luis Robles back, who is a good goalkeeper by all reasonable measures. And you've added reasonable parts. I know everybody's torn up that Peggy Lillian-Dula might be retiring, but he's 35, and Sasha Question is not, and Sasha's a good midfielder. And I think that I have open questions about what's going on the left because Mike Grella and Sal Zizzo, I'm not sure about that, and it's hard to replace Thierry Henry. Let's be fair.
Yeah.
And the center backs, have to form a partnership. I've heard great things about Ronald Zubar, Damian Peronel. Who knows?
I just can't trust the name Zubar. Something about it. It's like
it's better if you say it with a New York accent. De Zuba.
Oh, that does sound better.
Yeah, he fits right in. So I don't think the team is necessarily doomed for an out of playoff finish.
Okay.
They have to solidify everything. But I mean, it'd be like me saying, well, DC United's going to finish in the bottom because the last time they kept the bulk of their roster together was 2013, and we all know how 2013 went. And you've got a Spindler, suspended for the first 6. You've got Eddie Johnson out indefinitely. The team's a year older. They didn't get sufficient.
So in my defense, I only put DC in one tier above you guys. I put us in the we might make playoffs, but I'm not sure.
Well,
so.
and the thing for me, this is the reason I enjoy MLS over most of the European leagues, is you don't really know, and anything can realistically happen with all. Philly looked really dangerous in preseason. Whether or not that turns out to be a thing during the season, who knows? Montreal was abysmal last year. They've lost Marco Di Vaio. But, they didn't look terrible against DC. They certainly were not played. They're still running in the Champions League.
Yeah.
Go figure how. So I think it's a little too... And everybody had New England pegged as, they're going to run the East, and they got blown out in Seattle. So I think it's a little too difficult to predict. I actually took a bunch of shit in a prediction thread last month because, people were trying to predict who was going to win Newcomer of the Year, and I'm like, don't let it happen. The point of Newcomer of the Year is it's somebody who surprises you out of all the newcomers. You don't have to try and guess whether or not Josie's going to win it because first off, he's probably not even eligible. But why? What do you get out of saying it now? So I didn't do beginning of the year predictions where everybody was going to finish. I want to watch the league happen because I'm a fan of watching soccer in the U.S. as much as I am of anything, and so we'll see. I won't be surprised if the Red Bulls struggle, but that's every year. That's not anything new for them.
Yeah.
We're used to that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dan. After the break, we're going to come back with some Cruise Dude, and I believe James will be joining us on the other side. There will be music, but before that happens, Dan, anything you want to plug?
Plug? No. Just be kind when you're posting to the subreddit, and make sure you check /new to make sure it's not a dupe. Save me the pain of removing your shit.
Yeah, checking new.
If you're not reading,
if
you're not reading /MLS on new, you're not really reading it. I mean,
right.
that's the fire hose.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure having you on, and good luck dealing with what soon is about to be a 40,000 strong. Are we going to hit 50,000 by the end of the year? Do you think?
I think we'll hit 45 by the end of the year.
Okay. All right.
I wouldn't be surprised if we hit 50, but we had the World Cup last year, and that's what pushed us so far. So we'll see. You know what? I'm just happy we're bigger than the Arsenal subreddit.
Me too. Me too. All right. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, like I said again, it's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, man.
Sweet. All right.